Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is exactly noon, and because our speaker today is a professor of mathematics, it's important to be precise, so let's get things started. Most of you will know Ralucca Gera not only as a professor of mathematics, but as the Associate Provost for Graduate Education here at NPS, and she's speaking on a topic today very relevant to not to just to those of us who use technology in teaching, but to any of us who are attempting to cope with the challenges of teaching and learning under COVID-19 conditions, or just who are interested in learning to use the software tools we have, and that is teaching virtually with OneNote and Microsoft Teams. So Ralucca will have several pauses during her presentation where she will attend to questions. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the meeting chat. Ralucca will also post her notes for her slides, for the presentation in the chat. So those will be available as well. And just as a reminder, we are recording this presentation. I think that will get us started. So let's hand over to our speaker. Take it over, Ralucca.
Yes, thank you. And good morning, everyone. Actually, it's just turned to the afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am really pleased to be here and tell you a little bit about my experience this current quarter that just finished or is finishing right now. I've used OneNote and Teams for teaching in a math course, and I just want to share my experience, share how I use it, how I organize my information and my notes. I share the document, so you should have it in the chat. And if you came in late and you don't have the document, just ping me and I'll share it with you. So with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen in a second. I just wanted to mention that I do have the chat opened in a different browser, so I can see the chat. If you can put your questions in the chat, I'll try to incorporate them in the conversation as we go through it. And also that your questions will kind of guide my conversation, right? So I have about 35 minutes of information, but then it also provides me time to take a break and take questions, or just glance at the chat and bring in your answers to the questions as I go through. So keep the questions going in the chat, and even when we take a break, I'll go through those questions as well. Lastly, a lot of the how to do, the different things I'm going to talk about, they're already hyperlinked in the presentation. So I would like to show you how I use it and why I use it rather. And then if you want to know how to do that particular task, whether it's creating an appointment or creating a session, you can use the link in the PowerPoint to be able to see the discussions. If somebody can reattach the PowerPoint, it would be great because I already am sharing my screen. All right, so Teams and OneNote. So first of all, open that Zoom chat and please take a couple of seconds and answer this one question that will help me guide my conversation. What is your main challenge in this online environment? So as you are operating in this environment, whether you're teaching or otherwise, please put that in the chat. And I keep glancing at the chat and I'll try to bring that into the conversation. And Fred, if there's a way to turn off that beeping when people join, it would be fantastic. It's been beeping for a long time, but maybe it's too late now. So let me go over the agenda. So for me, pedagogy comes first. So I've looked at what's the instructional goals, and for that, then what pedagogy would support my instructional goals. And then it's the question of what technology would support what I'm trying to achieve. So that's the way I'm going to structure the talk. I'll give you a demo of how I actually use it. So it's for a live class, so I'll show you how it's being used by the student and myself. I'll give you students' feedback, both on the Teams and the OneNote as a software. And then I'll show you the way I set up my, my equipment, right? I have a laptop with dual screens, and then I also have an iPad that's connected to the same meeting. So that's what I have right now as well. I have my iPad on the side where I can see what I'm sharing, and then I can also look at the chat or share from the iPad. And then we'll go to Q&A throughout this conversation as we go from one section to the next. All right, so the class I'm teaching is a 4,000 level class in the math department. So it's one of the last classes they take for their master's degree, and I have PhD students as well. What you're looking at is a schedule for the classes. For each row, you've got the different weeks and what we cover in that week. And then what I want to go through is the columns. So my class is it's a blend of asynchronous learning as well as synchronous learning. So the asynchronous learning through guided learning of curating content, as well as one-on-one time that they can have with me during that scheduled time, is on Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we do synchronously problem solving based on everything they've learned on Monday and Tuesday. So that's a lot more of proofs and problem solving. And then on Thursday, we do data analysis by firing up different software and grabbing data and doing an analysis of what they've learned each particular week. So that's the way I structure it. So about half of it is asynchronous and half of it is synchronous. So what were the instructional goals for the course? I was certainly looking for a way of empowering students to take ownership of their learning. It's a 4,000 level class, one of the last class they're taking. And I was looking for a way to have that really measure up to what a graduate level course would be, where I would guide them through it, but I would not do everything for them. So it was certainly a student-centric learning environment. For the asynchronous for the asynchronous learning and as well as the one-on-one discussion. So again, that's the time when I would be on Teams and they could just call me on the spot during that asynchronous learning that they were doing. The focus for me was on facilitating exploration and differentiation. So what that means is I did not give the exact same content to everybody, right? I had mandatory portions of the content that everybody had to do. And then each student could go deeper into different portions of the content, depending on what they had a curiosity about or they wanted to learn more about. And I also offered different pathways of exploring it. It was not that linear way that everybody has to do it the same way. I offered different mediums for them to interact with the content. So it could be videos, PowerPoint, it could be the textbook. There were also PDFs that they would have to read, code exchange, demos. So it was a combination of many things that students would be able to interact with, in the end meeting the same objective, right? Same way of testing their knowledge. For the synchronous version, I was looking at building on active learning. So lots of conversations, concept mapping of what we were learning, problem solving, where I was asking questions, they would answer, we would work together. So lots of sharing the content we're creating, data analysis, group work, and so on. And lastly, the third portion, which was maybe a little bit new or just because it is a 4,000 level class, it's the co-creation of content. So students were creating content, they would share that in Teams with their peers as well as me. And then receiving the feedback, they would incorporate that feedback before they turn in their final project. And those final projects actually reuse as content for the next course, right? So incoming students can see what the previous cohort has learned in the class, and they can actually use that content in that exploration phase of the asynchronous learning. So that's how I built my exploration part of the teaching through the content that the graduating students are giving me back. So then they have different applications based on what that particular student was creating. All right. So what was the functionality then that would help me achieve those goals? Well, the most and foremost for me was an agile platform, right, with a single sign-on that provides a portal to all the other resources. So I wanted to be able to embed everything in a single resource, in a single portal, maybe it's a better word, where the channels or the tabs can link then to different software that I use, information, resources, in a mode that actually makes sense to the students and it's easy to access, as well as integrate with, for example, email or polls or other information, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, everything else that you need to bring together in a nice fashion. I was also looking for a way to intuitively post and curate the content. So when we post information through Teams, such as file sharing, you can curate what that does. And then there is also just the file sharing itself where students can see it. Class Notebook, it's been a fantastic tool for us, and that is the OneNote, and I will talk about that in just a little bit as well. I was looking for a way to support conversations between students, so allowing them to talk to each other independently of me being present, or as well as just during the class, but as well as conversations between students and myself, right? So promoting that active learning in the classroom, that was a requirement for me. And I wanted to use a tool that would make that possible, right? So in particular, the channels in the meeting post served it very well. Timely and feedback mechanism was very important because if it's not timely, it's not as useful. So being able to communicate offline on the same topic that we started during class or during their asynchronous learning was extremely important, and the focused channels provide just that. Of course, you can do assignments and grading in Teams. And lastly, this saved me a lot of time. So for those of you using Zoom, you might find this very useful as well. The automatic posting of the classroom recording goes straight to Teams. They also go in Microsoft Stream, but it goes in the classroom itself so that students can access that as soon as the class is over. Okay, so looking at the chat, I believe a lot of what I've talked about addresses that lack of personal connection as well as avoiding the PowerPoint trap. I want to give you now a overview of what the team looks like for my class, and then we'll go into the demo. So when you enter the team for my class, right, this is the name of my class, it's Math 4027. And you're going to see that information is structured in 2 dimensions, right? So on the vertical dimension, you have the channels that stack up below each other, much like Sakai would stack them up, right? So the general channel that has all the general information for you, including the recording to the teams, announcements, anything else you need to put, that's general. Then we have the breakout rooms. Those are persistent breakout rooms, so you can use them from class to class. And then we have the topic-focused channels that allow the conversation to focus on that particular topic. And the files that we share also are standardized for that particular topic. Most of mine are actually for the different software that I use. So it allows students to communicate with each other as well as with me. So a channel is, it's exactly what you see tagged right here, and you create it by clicking on the 3 dots, and it opens up a subgroup, as mentioned, where you can then focus the conversation. So when we talk about, say, CoCalc for Python coding, then all of their conversation in CoCalc will stay in that channel. So then students can easily then find the content later on because it's being organized by the topic. Now, the second dimension, right, it's the tabs. The tabs at the top show up for each channel. So when you look at the post in here, those are the posts of the general channel because that's the channel we're in, right? If you go into the breakout rooms, you have posts in that room. So every single one of those channels has the post and the files. So that, again, that allows you to organize the content so that you can have it by the channel. Besides the post, then you have files. Those are files that people can collaborate on, right? So for example, this is where they signed up for presentations. I start the file and then they can edit the file, and we all work collaboratively. It's a little bit harder at first because you really have to let go of control, right? Everybody can edit, everybody can delete. But in the end, those are, very mature students that you can count on, and everybody can mistakes, but you can always undo it if needed. And yes, to answer the question in the chat, this does replace Sakai for me. So I did not use Sakai for this class. Class Notebook is where you bring in all the notes from faculty, students, and the collaborative notes. So it's got 3 sections in it, and I'll talk about this very quickly. And then the students can have it all wrapped up in a digital notebook that then they can take further down to their other classes as needed. And the last part is the assignments as well as the grades. So that's the last tab for me. I'll show you how you can create these assignments, and all the scores automatically get saved in the gradebook. And the gradebook really looks like an Excel spreadsheet, if you wish, with students and on the rows, and then grades on the vertical, on the columns. Okay, so you got the idea, right? So there are the channels, and that's where you organize the content however you wish by topic. And then I use the tabs to be able to break down the content for each of the channels. Most of my information is in the general channel, and then we use the specialized channels for that particular topic. Okay, so with this in mind, I want to do a demo of my particular class. So here is Teams. Right, so this is what you see when you join my class, right? So in the general channel, right now I'm in the first tab in post. So as you scroll up, you see kind of everything I've been posting. So when I break them out into rooms, here is the text that tells them where to go. I also have surveys I've done. But in particular, what you may notice is that the recordings of the classes go in here, right? So if I click on this, you can see all the recordings of all my Wednesday classes, because all my Wednesday classes were similar. So this is a recurring appointment, and all the recordings get saved in here automatically, right? And that's just the way I created it. You can do this through the calendar. As soon as you put in the calendar in your team, if you invite them through the channel, then it gets posted in that particular channel. The Files tab then, of course, as it says, it allows you to share content with the students, organize it in folders if you wish, and let everybody else edit those files as well. Class Notebook is one of my favorites in this class because it really allows me to edit the content from Teams. So it's packaged within Teams. It gives me folders and subfolders, and I'll talk about it briefly after the Teams overview. And then students can take it away at the end of the class. So it really puts together my notes, their notes, as well as those collaborative notes that they would have on a piece of paper in class that they would throw in their folder. And all of this is actually automatically saved in the notebook. Assignments, yes, they are inherent to Teams, so they come through Teams. And so if you load, you can load all the assignments that we have. You can see all the tests from the class. So then if I open one of them, for example, in particular, the grades show below, but then if you want to see what the student view is, right? So you have your directions. If your assignment can be put just in instructions, you can do so. Mine has a lot of math in it and pictures, so I usually attach a PDF to it with the content itself that I want them to see. So there are two options for this particular test, and they can work on it. And then they just upload the PDF in Teams, and it doesn't have to be PDF. They can upload code, they can upload a video of themselves solving the problem, they can upload a picture if they do it by hand. Part of our class is for students to learn how to type up math in LaTeX. So actually all of my students type it in LaTeX and turn it in as a PDF. And I see a lot of conversation about channels. So let me finish this and then I'll talk a little bit more about channels. So the last part of the test, right, of the assignments is the rubrics. It's one of my favorites because it makes it very easy for me to be objective by grading and tell students what to expect and what I'm expecting from them. So what should they expect, right? The test is 10 points. 70% of that test comes from the accuracy of the proof you're turning in. And this is what I'm looking for them to turn in, right? So it's a checklist that they can go through after they're done with their proof to make sure that everything is according to what I'm expecting them to do. And if that's not the case, then I can give them partial credit based on how minor or significant that error was. And then I can provide comments to them. So it doesn't just say minor error, but it tells them why I took away the points. And then, of course, if you can do your grading scale however you wish, and you can have as many details as you would like to in each of the tabs. Then it also says the next 10% comes from the presentation of the proof. And is that presentation, does it have correct spelling? Does it use mathematical notation correctly, and so on? So again, it's a checklist for them to turn in to check before they turn it in. 10% more comes from the clarity of the paper, and the last 10% is from the rigor and precision of the paper. What's nice is that when I upload this rubric, right, as soon as I open and I look at the test, I can actually open the rubric for each student, and when you click on those cards, it actually assigns the point for that particular category, and then when you close it down, the final score is cumulatively added to the student test. So I don't have to do it over and over, and then the students can actually see what they got the points for or where they lost points. And then the last tab again for me, and I'm not going to click on it since it is actually a live class, is the grades tab. So when you click on this grades tab, you can see every student as a row, every test assignment you have as a column, so you can see all the whole class at a glance, or you can click on one student and see everything in one. Okay, so this kind of finishes the demo, and what I would like to do is go back to the presentation. I'll let you read students. Oh, I'm sorry, let me talk about this and I'll let you read students' feedback. 2 new features in Teams. So once you are in a meeting, you can now get a large gallery view. And this goes up to 7 by 7, so 49 students. I only have 16 students in my class, so that's the most I would see in my class. And again, when you see those hyperlinks in the presentation, you can click on it and it tells you how to do it. So you can actually learn how to do it. I don't have to show to you how to do it. The second part that's also new is the breakout room within the meeting. So once you are in the meeting itself, this is a new button, and if you click on it, you can actually separate your class into breakout rooms, either randomly, or you can create a specific number of groups and then put them in the groups. This is different than the other breakout rooms. So these are not persistent. This is per call, you break them out into groups and they work on it, and then at the end it closes. The persistent ones that I have as channels are more appropriate if you have a long-term project, maybe it spans over 3 weeks or maybe over the whole quarter. And you want them to have that way of going back to the breakout room to add more content to it. Again, I said I have 16 students, 12 of them took the survey that I have, and 12 of 12 did find that Teams provides a quality environment that supports in-class and out-of-the-class communication. So I'll let you read the students' comments while I'm going to look in the chat to see if I can answer more questions. All right, so I know you have the PowerPoint, so you can read those later, but I want to go back to Teams very quickly based on the comments in the chat. So those channels, right, they're not just chat. So if I click, for example, in one of the breakout rooms, there is a chat function within the breakout room, right? So anything they write is going to show in here. But then if they upload files, you can go to the files and see what people have uploaded as well. And again, those are persistent as well as long as you have a class, those channels are going to be there. So even when people are done meeting, they're still going to be there. How the students use it? Well, once they click on that particular breakout room, so if you tell them what team they're supposed to be part of, then they go and they click the Meet Now button. If there is a session going on, they're just going to join it. If there is no session, they're starting a new session, and then everybody else is going to join them in the breakout room will just join the exact same session. And as faculty, I click on one, then I click on the other breakout room, I join their meeting. So that's how I drop into the different meetings that they're in. And then I can leave the meeting afterwards. So the the channels that you have on this vertical dimension, they're not just chats. You can think of them as sections where you can organize information, and the information could be the chat itself, or it could be the files that they exchange. So for example, if you look at the software chat, right? When I look at the software chat, you can see students posting for other students. They curate the content, right, because they tell you what it is, they show you some pictures, and then you can see the content at the bottom. Then the same thing for me, right? So you can see a snippet, you can see just a little bit of it, but if you click see more, you can see the whole picture that I was sharing with them. And then I say, oh, here is the network, so they can download it, right? So the chat happens within that particular category that I call Gephi. So Gephi is just one of the software we use. So all the conversations about Gephi stay in that channel, right? Then when we talk about CoCalc, that's when they actually start coding in Python. All the conversations for that will happen in that channel. So if they need a Python code and files associated with it, they can go through that channel. What also allows is for students to support students. So when students find resources, they share with each other, right? So other students can support each other, right? Remember, I was trying to empower them, right, to take lead for their learning, right? So they can ask questions, they can answer each other's questions. And usually I kind of just go through and I give it thumbs up just to make sure, or I bring their attention if it is incorrect. But they're doing fantastic on their own, right? So I enable them to take charge of their learning. Again, this is a 4,000 level class, and that may not necessarily be as good for all the classes, but it works fantastically for me.
Ralucca, before you continue, could you please address Judith's question, which is how do you prevent students from overwriting one another's work when they are in a shared notebook?
Yes, so let me talk about that when we get to the notebook, because there is that is a functionality that I'm going to talk about. So this is about Teams, and the second part of the presentation looks at notebook. Anything else, Fred, that you think I need to answer?
You know, you've covered most of them, and I think perhaps it would be, why don't we go ahead and go to this second part of your presentation?
Okay, so again, I see questions on how do you do breakout rooms. I have those hyperlinked in the notes, so you can look through the notes, so you can actually see the how to, and I have resources at the end of the PowerPoint as well. All right, so then I talked about having the teams, right? So Teams for me is that agile platform that brings everything together. One of which is OneNote, which is the notebook that students take their digital notes in. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, it integrates with Teams. So as I've already shown you, you can open it through Teams. So it's all conveniently in one location. I also open it on the OneNote app because I want to make sure that students can actually see the full screen rather than just the little portion of it. And I'll show you that in just a second. The reason I like OneNote is because most of our students are now moving to the digital notebook rather than the physical notebook. But let me make the comparison to the physical notebook. So imagine your standard folder, right, where you drop in pages. Now take the standard folder and divide it into 3 sections. The first section is the one dedicated for instructors. So imagine everything that an instructor would write on the board would just magically transport straight into that section of the notebook, right? Without the student doing anything. So that's one section of the notebook. The second section of the notebook is where students would just take out a piece of paper, they would write their notes, and then they would put it in the folder. And then the next day they take out another piece of paper, they write notes, they put it in the folder. So the same way they will do it in this digital environment, and I'll show you how they do it in a little bit. And then the third section of the notebook is students collaborating with students, right? So you know how sometimes you give them something to work, or you leave the class and they stay behind and they scribble on a piece of paper, they make a copy so everybody has a copy of it, and that gets put in this third portion of the notebook. Well, imagining all of that just magically coming up in this magical notebook, the digital notebook, without the student having to make copies or anything else, right? So those 3 sections are in the student notebook, which goes back to, I think it's a Judith question of how do you prevent them from writing over each other's notes? And I'll show you when we actually get to using the OneNote. But it's because of the partitions that allows different people to write in the notebook differently. This facilitates efficient office hours for me, because when I have office hours that are a group office hours, so more than one person drops in, then I go to that third portion of this magical notebook where I can write, students can write, all of us can write. But if it is a one-on-one office hour, then I get to the first portion of the notebook where the students can write, because whatever they write, I can see as well. So then we can both, my student and I, can actually collaborate on that particular portion of the notes and be able to just write on the same piece of paper. It also augments my notes, right? So that the middle part of this notebook, the second portion was where I write, right? What I write on the Blackboard, which magically transport in this notebook. Well, that's because even after students leave, I can still write on that notebook. So you know how sometimes you look at the clock and you have 3 minutes before class ends, but you have more than 3 minutes of writing, right? And you don't want to hold your students longer because then they're going to be late for their class, the next class. So what I do is I take the 3 minutes and I talk about it. And then I say, even after you guys leave, I will take the time and I'll write it nice and neat in the notebook. And that way they can actually have comprehensive notes that they can refer to, which are my notes, the ones that I share with the class. It's also very easy to reference, just like students would put a date and a time on the pages. You can do the same thing on these pages so you can easily organize them. And again, I'll show you when we get to the demo. And lastly, the sharing of the private notes is important because that really preserves the content that students want to write that nobody else can overwrite. And also, if they are not comfortable sharing with others, right, they can have it in that folder just for themselves and not for others. I don't know if there is a class recording size limit, so I'm going to let someone in iText answer that. I did not run into a problem for that size limit, not in the OneNote, not in Teams either. Okay, so let me give you an overview of what the OneNote looks like, and then we'll open it up so you can all see it. So there's sections in the notebook. So this is not two-dimensional like the other one. It's rather a single dimension with subfolders. So you have your welcome tab where you can read of how you can actually use OneNote. And I keep that there just for students to learn how to use it. And then you have the collaborative space. So when you get to the collaborative space, that's where I can write, students can write, as well as them just writing with each other. So I don't even have to be part of their conversation. So this is the collaborative space, and nobody has really control of who's going to delete what and edit what. So as students write on it, right, they're all in the same place. And then if you as an instructor or if you as a student would like a copy of it, you can just take a snapshot and put it in your personal folder. So the collaborative space is really for everyone to write on, and there is no control of what gets deleted or added. You have the content library. This is where I write and students see. So only I can edit it, so nobody can overwrite it by mistake or delete it by mistake. And that's where I have my general information as well as what I write during classes. And I'll show you that in just a little bit. And then you have the teacher folder. I did not talk about this yet because this is only me writing, me seeing. So it's where I have my solutions to test, something that I need to pull at the last minute. And that's why I have them in the teacher folder. I didn't use it as much because almost everything I need to is being posted so everybody can have access. And the last part, which is the nicest, right, is students having their own folder. So here is David Barnhill that has his own folder, then Andrew Dietz that has his own folder, and they can put in it whatever they wish. They can see that and I can see it, but nobody else from class can see it. And they can have tabs and organize it in subfolders if you wish. So I'm going to give you a chance to look over this. So this is, again, the breakdown of the class where I look at some questions in the chat. You can reuse teams from class to class. It took me a lot longer to set up my first team because this is the first time I used it in this fashion. I probably started about a week or two before classes started, and then I just kept refining and asking for help, asking for opinion from different people in order to refine it. But now that I've used it, it's much easier, and you can copy the theme and reuse the materials. Yes, you can do polling of students within teams with options and with longer sections as well. Is there versioning at all? I believe there is because all your documents are being saved actually on SharePoint. So you can go in SharePoint and see the version control. So it's not straight in Teams, but through all the channels that you can get. When you click on the document, it opens it in SharePoint. Can you put class materials in Teams instead? I'm assuming you're asking instead of, can you do it instead of OneNote? Yes, you may. I use OneNote mostly for sharing my handwritten notes. But the class materials, the PowerPoints, I do put them straight in the folders in Teams actually. Okay. I see somebody saying that there's a better chat function in Teams. I'm not sure what is a better chat function, but if you'd like to expand in that, please do so. All right. So that's the overview of Teams. So I just want to take about 3 more minutes to give you, the overview of OneNote. I want to take a few minutes now to give you the demo for the OneNote, and then I'll give you some feedback from students. All right, so here is OneNote. Right, so when you fire up OneNote, what you're going to see here is a bunch of folders, right? So again, remember that they're just categories, right? So the first one is the collaboration space, then it's the content library, that's where you as faculty post, then teacher only, so that's only for your eyes, and then you can see a folder for every single student in my class. So let's go through them one at a time. Collaboration space. So what you see in here are folders, right? So there were 3 main categories for the students, so just ignore the teacher only because they don't see that. Within each category, like the collaboration space, then I have tabs so I can organize them. So for my Wednesday classes, then I get pages. So the way you would add a page is by doing the plus, it gives you a new page. And if you want to organize it, you put it below, then you call it whatever you'd like this to be called, right? And that shows up as the title of the section, right, of the page, I'm sorry. And you can put any information you put in here, you can type, or you can use the markers at the top to actually draw or write. So again, I open this in the OneNote app rather than in Teams, just because I need full landscape so I can keep writing all my content. Again, this is something that we worked on collaboratively, and people can just take a snapshot and put it in their own, or you can copy the whole page. Besides the collaboration space, and I told you that we have the content library. So that's where I post my information. So up front, I posted the syllabus, right? So they can find the syllabus in here. You can post the syllabus if you wish in the folders as well. I was trying to mimic that notebook that has all the information just digitally. I like to give my students a overview of what we cover every day, every week, so they know where they're going. So that's that. I also give them homework. Also, graph theory, what I teach, has a whole language by itself. So this is a long list of all the definitions that they could look through on their own as you need to. You can link to PDFs, or you can drop in PDFs. So here is a link at the top, and then I also dropped it in for a quick display. But if you click it on this, then it opens the PDF separately, so they can still print it if they wish to print it. Okay, so the general information is where I would put anything that would normally put in Sakai before even classes start, right? So that's all of their information up front, something that they would be able to put in their physical magical folder as well. The other tabs, for example, if you go to the Wednesday one, this is what I write during classes. So if you click on different tabs, you can see what I write. So this is what I would call a page. You can add more pages. So this is what I would put on the blackboard or on the whiteboard. Then most of the times students copy and they put it in their folders. But instead of them having to copy it, right, it automatically shows in their folder through this. But then they can take notes on their own in their folders while they're watching me present it. So I normally share my screen in here from the iPad. So I would write on the iPad and share my screen. So they don't actually have to be in OneNote to see it. They get just see it from me sharing the screen. And I'm happy to share my screen from the iPad towards the end if there is time. I call it a page because that's what OneNote does, but it's really not a page. You can scroll. It's a lot of landscape you have. But in the end, what it does, it puts together all the pages for that particular day. So you can see that every Wednesday I have a new page with the content from that particular day, right? So as you can scroll, you see all my content and the proofs that we do on each day. Of course, writing is a little bit harder than it is on the blackboard because you don't have that friction against the blackboard. As you see, my writing towards the end got a little bit better. In the beginning, it was very slippery and it was very hard. It took me a while to get used to writing, but I think all of us by now are getting better at writing on digital platforms. Also notice that I have them color-coded. So Wednesday collaboration space matches my Wednesday handwriting, right, when I do proofs and problem solving, and the same thing for the Thursday. Okay. So we talked about two sections of the notebook, right? The collaborative space as well as the content library. I'm not going to go into the teachers only. Again, you can organize your own folders however you wish. This is just for you to have quick access to whatever you'd like to. And then the folders for all the students, you can see all the folders in here. I got permission from Andrew to share his. Yes, I do handwritten notes on my iPad, and then I share them via Teams. So this is the question in the chat. That really mimics the Blackboard. I started doing that actually a year ago. So exactly this class last year, when I taught it face-to-face, I used OneNote rather than the Blackboard behind me, and I just projected it. And it worked really well, and students really appreciated having a copy of my notes. I know that doesn't work for everyone, and it depends on your style. There are many faculty that believe that everybody needs to recopy everything down to understand it. And there are faculty that believe that they can focus on the conversation and have the notes later. So use whichever one you would find best. But for me, it works best if they can focus on the questions, because I do have an interactive teaching style, and I want them to be part of the conversation, and then they can have my notes later. But what you're going to notice by right now, when we look at class notes, students still take notes. So here is Andrew's note, right? So he happens to type them up, and some actually write up their notes. Then he can highlight and ask me whatever he needs to ask. Also, you can notice that he actually cropped this out of my notes, right? So while I was discussing, right, he took a picture of the shared screen and he inserted this in his notes. And he can do so for other classes as well, right? So it just so happens that he organizes himself by typing rather than writing things by hand. However, when we get to homework practice, for example, right, so he can grab the homework problems out of a digital device and then use the pencil to actually draw the solution. And then again, as I mentioned, we use this for one-on-one office hours afterwards, right? So he can go in here and say, well, here's my homework, right? Is this the right answer? Can you help me with it? So it provides a medium for both of us to get in his private notebook and look at his homework. And as Judith asked earlier, nobody else has access to this besides the student and myself. So he can then count on the fact that everything he puts here stays here. Ideally, us as faculty should not mess up their folders, right? So that is the feedback that I would provide to students. Also, as they work through quizzes, right, they can have practice problems. So he actually didn't have any, and then he can ask me, and I can go in it, and we can each pick a color. So let me just quickly show you, right? So as you are on the folder, right, everybody can pick a color, so you know who's writing if you wish. And then, you can annotate. So actually right now, I've got my cursor and then my pen. And you can easily annotate on his work, right? So here, if I want to point to something, and I can write if I need to, or I can underline, or even nicer, right? They have highlighters. So it's very easy for you to, oops, I didn't take the highlighter. Where I'm trying to use this on a standing monitor. So you can highlight what's important for them. And then hopefully I'll go back and clean up the folder for my students. So every single student has that, and what they put in there stays between him and the instructor, or her and the instructor, versus the collaborative space that everybody can edit. All right, so that finishes the demo for OneNote. Here is the feedback for the students. From the students, again, 12 students answered. One said that he did not find OneNote being beneficial. I have to say, I did not force the students to use OneNote. This particular student did not mention why he didn't find it beneficial, so I don't know why it was not beneficial, nor do I expect that there is a piece of software out there that everybody really completely approves of. It worked for the majority of the students, and for the other ones that it didn't, I'm assuming that they're still taking notes on paper as they've done in the past. So I'll let you read the comments while I'm going to look at the chat to see if there are any other questions I can take.
And there were a couple people that raised their hands and then lowered them to ask a question. If your question has been answered, that's great. If not, then please go ahead and raise your hand again, and Ralucca will respond.
So let's do that. We have about 15 minutes, and I only have about 4 more minutes of talking. So let's go a few questions before I finish this up then. So yeah, raise your hands, and I'll call on you if you raise your hands. If you have any thoughts. So I don't actually see any hands. Oh yeah, Chris to me.
So I was just going to clarify my written comment earlier about the chat functionality. I think that the Teams chat outside of the video channel is pretty good because it's persistent, because you can sort it by channels as you're clearly doing. And I think that's the one area that it's got clear advantage over a Sakai and Teams combination. I do find that the way that we're using chat here doesn't work as well in Teams, right? Because the window doesn't allow it to stay up persistently in the same way. You lose your participant window. You can't see the participant window and the chat window and the shared screen or the people's faces in Teams yet. Now that may change, but anyhow, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the persistent chat functionality of Teams. I think is its real value. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. So let me actually address that, because that is my next slide, and I did not ask Chris to tell me that, to ask the question, and then I'll go to Drago right after. So how do I set this up, right? And that gets exactly the chat functionality that Chris mentioned. So first of all, as I already mentioned, I have my duplicate information on an iPad. So what you see down here at the bottom is my iPad. I joined the exact same meeting on 2 devices, on the iPad that's at the bottom, as well as on the laptop with the 2 screens, and however you have your 2 screens that are available for you. What this allows me to do is see what students see. So when I look at the iPad, right now I do the same thing. I can see what you're seeing. So then I make sure that I do actually share the right environment. And moreover, if for some reason my laptop freezes or whatever else happens to my laptop, I have my second device already in the meeting, so I can quickly transfer to my second device and still be engaged in the same meeting. So I always have 2 ways of connecting, even if it's just a cell phone, if nothing else, to see what students see. Secondly, the chat conversation versus the content introduction. So that's on the back 2 screens in this picture. Let me actually zoom into that a little bit. So when you are in Teams, you're on this part on the left, right? Then you join your meeting, and as soon as you join your meeting, a new window pops open, which is the one on the right. So what I do is in my original Teams, I stay in the team that I'm in the meeting of, right? And I stay on the chat so I can see people's posts, and I can curate conversations during the class. And then on the second one that just popped open, that's where I see the participants. I can see they have their hands raised, as well as the information being shared. So in this case, it's actually David Black that's sharing his screen. Also, if you use the large gallery mode, you can see down here at the bottom, right? You can actually see everybody's face in it, right? You can see up to 49 participants, which of course is useless when it's that tiny, but on my iPad, I can actually zoom in and see their faces. But this really, by having dual screens, it allows me to have complete overview of chat information in my original team, as well as participants raising their hand and the content that's being shared to make sure that the right content is being shared. So this goes back to what Chris just mentioned. Also, if you are going to be teaching in the classroom, so in the hybrid environment next quarter, you're going to have 2 screens in the classroom. So you can have a setup similar to this if you happen to use Teams. Drago, you want to ask your question?
Yes. Thank you. This is very informative. I was typing some questions privately to some people that I don't know how it happened, so they may not be timely. My question is for that kind of students folders that get created. Do you enter those manually, or there's a way to kind of enter them from the class roster or something like that?
Correct. So it actually is entered from the class roster. So in my class, I had extra people that were sitting in my class. You can actually even still see April Pertig in my class. So every single person that's in my team as a member gets a folder.
Oh, okay.
So I don't have to do it manually. But what I do manually are the subfolders. So when I create my class, before I actually set up the OneNote, and again, this is what TLC can help you with setting up your OneNote. I also have tutorials within the PowerPoint. I do decide what folders should be in it. So while the main folders with their names get created automatically, I decide on the folders, and then if you open all of their folders, they all have the exact same format, same color coding. So that's what I thought would be useful, and that's something that you get to decide.
Okay, so you created that, and then as they joined this, they basically it was populated. You didn't have to go open each one of them and enter.
Correct. And the same thing for the grades. And even if somebody adds in late, like April was not in my class from the beginning, I added her about halfway through the quarter. It's there. She still gets a folder and she still gets a row for a class.
Right. And then my other question is for the app, for the gradebook or gradebook app. Is that something that we have to kind of select under kind of this more and this is something that's available?
It gets set up automatically as well, because when you ask ITAC, when you email April or CLE to create a team for you, it gets set up as a class. So you have to ask to create a team in a classroom format, and then those get created automatically as well as the class notebook. The class notebook may not be populated, so you might have to do a little bit of a setup. Again, I was using OneNote even before COVID started, so I was already comfortable and familiar with it. But all of those tabs come standard when you have your OneNote or your team being created as a class.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you. All right. So let me go to, I think I only have one slide left. So this is the view if I do share my screen. So when I share my screen from my iPad, when I actually write things by hand, right? So I alternate between presenting from my laptop, presenting from my iPad, whatever it's needed for me to do it. And to tell you the truth, it may feel overwhelming listening to how many screens you have to share and so on. But what you do is you start slowly, right? At first, you start by sharing only from your iPad. And students are very understanding right now. So this is the time for you to practice. A year from now, I think everybody's going to expect for you to be able to do it. So more you use it, better you get at it, right? In the beginning, it was very hard for me to have my attention all over, as one of the comments said, right? It's a lot of multitasking, but more you're doing, better you get. It's just like working out, right? When you start working out, it's hard, but more you're doing, better you get at it. And it's the same thing in here. Just start slowly, start with what you're comfortable with, and in time, you're going to get better. And students will tell you, right? I have my hand up and you didn't call on me. So then you're going to figure out how to do that in time as well. These are just additional resources, particular how to do different things that I talked about. So please use them as you would like to. I want to thank you again for your attention, for your time. I'm happy you joined me for this conversation. This will be recorded, so you can actually have the recording and go to that particular portion if you want to revisit it again. Again, lots of the information is in Teams. I'm so used to Teams. It's in Zoom's chat in the PowerPoint. But I do want to get one more information from you before you leave and before I get to questions. So open up chat again and type in, what is the main takeaway from today's meeting that you can bring to your class? If you can have one for Teams and one for Zoom, that would be fantastic. It would really let me understand what was useful from it. If it was informative or intuitive, but it's not necessarily if it was informative or intuitive, rather, what can you bring to your class? I want to see what was meaningful to you and your experience. And with that, I'll turn it back to questions, and I'll stick around for as long as there are questions. Thank you all for your participation. I'll open it to questions. So let me open up my chat so I can see your guys' hands now. All right, participants. Okay, so I see Drago, you still have your hand up. I'm not sure if that's left over, if it's a new one.
No, this is the new question. So with the recording of the videos, is this something that kind of automatically, you said that, but it automatically gets to the unless you do anything, it'll automatically get populated. That's one of the things that I was kind of getting to write in the beginning. It went to the private channel, but that's one of the kind of hassles that you have to go in and post and the passwords and everything. It was
right. So let me show you how you override all that hassle, right? So this is Teams, right? And if I open the calendar tab, right? So can everybody see on the left where I click, right? So you have your chat, which is one-on-one with people. You have your Teams, then you have your calendar app. So when you have your calendar app, it actually opens your calendar. This is your personal calendar. Nobody else can see it, right? It's your personal calendar. So what you do then is when you create a new meeting, right? Whatever title you give, right? That's going to show up, and I'll tell you where it's going to show up. So that's the title you're going to have for the meeting itself, as well as for the recording. So if this is my test meeting, right, that's the time. Now, this is where you usually put in your attendees, right? So that's where you put in all your students in the class. My recommendation is not do that, rather go to the channel. So when you go to channel and you look for your class, so mine is 4027, right? So here is my class, and you can see all the channels that I had on the left. If I click on general, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite everybody in from my team, and it's going to be posted in this class in the general channel. So what is it going to be posted? Well, first of all, the meeting itself. So it shows up as a calendar appointment that then students can just accept, and it shows up on their calendar. And then the automatic recording. So once we're done with that meeting, the automatic recording goes exactly on that general channel under the title that you gave it for the presentation, right? So this automatically sends a calendar. Well, it doesn't send it straight to the calendar, but it puts it in the team. By students accepting it, it gets on their calendar. They get the link for every single meeting automatically, and then they get the recording automatically. So what I do is I create one, because every single week I do the same thing, for example, every Wednesday. So I create this so that it repeats every single Thursday or every single Wednesday. You can do it meeting by meeting, but that kind of defeats the purpose if you have to do that many calendar appointments. But as soon as this goes in the channel, then it puts password, actually you don't need password, it's Teams, sorry. It puts everything straight in your calendar, then you don't have to handle anything for any of the students. If you don't want it to show in general, so if you only want to have a meeting with some of the students, so maybe you want to do just your first group of students, right? You pick that breakout room. So then it shows as a calendar appointment just in the breakout room. So students that need or want to participate will have to go to it, accept it. It shows on their calendar. They can then automatically join. And then at the end of the meeting, the recording gets posted exactly in that breakout room. Frank, I see you have a question as well.
Yes, thanks, Ralucca. Very nice presentation. I will tell you that my experience using Teams is limited, right? I use it for some things, but primarily have been using Zoom for most of my meetings and so forth. So I feel a lot more comfortable with that. And so I'm kind of trying to get to compare those two, right? Whether, Teams clearly has a lot more functionality. I guess my question is, is it overkill for what I want to do? What's your sense? Have you compared, like, what would you say to someone who has, trying to decide between, say, Zoom and Teams?
So for me, Zoom is really just a communication tool. You set up your meeting, you show up, and you communicate, right? It's not a collaborative tool. You cannot share persistently files that everybody can change in time. You're not able to save everything that you would in Teams. So you're right. Teams may be overkill, but I started using Teams 2 years ago, way before COVID, right? So in the beginning, it was just simple chat. And then after I got comfortable with that, I started sharing files. And after I got comfortable with that, I started adding and adding and adding. So the only thing I would say is don't think of it as overkill from the beginning. Start adding the functionality that you need for your class. Remember when I started my presentation, I said, what was the goal for my class? So identify what your goal is, identify what you need, and then you can only bring from Teams what you need to bring from Teams. Again, in the beginning, all I used was chat and the files, because it was too much and I couldn't distribute my attention and I couldn't handle it, right? But slowly you bring it in and you get more comfortable, as I said, just like working out. Students, in the first day when I gave students the overview, a few of them were like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. It was too much. Because what I didn't realize is that they were not comfortable with it as I was. They haven't been using it for 2 years. So I overwhelmed them in the very first day. And I said, don't worry, for the first week, I'm going to work through it. We'll break it down little by little. I did the recording. They could have the recording. And then slowly they started adding things in the chat, and they started sharing files. Every single time I would start my meeting, I would share my screen right away. And then as I would bring different files and folders in, I would answer another question or two. And slowly they built up that, it's just like working out, right? They started using it more and more. And then by the end of the quarter, they thought that it's way better than Zoom as well. So I think lots of people like Zoom because it's way more simpler, right? You know the few buttons and you know what to do with it. And if you want to use Teams just as a communication tool and you don't want to have all the collaborative parts of it, then that's fine. Just start it that way, right? I've heard of faculty that use Zoom for communication, right? And then they use Teams actually for the collaboration. So to me, that's even harder because you're making students use both. And it's not so much different, right? Because functionality is still there. It's just that you have to be able to remember, where do I find my hand raising? Where is my file sharing, right? How do I stop recording? How do I start recording? So it's got the same functionality. It's just buttons are differently placed. So you're just gonna have to find the buttons. So my only advice is start slowly, just like you would for working out.
And Ralucca, we have, perhaps you could take time for one more question. We are just a little bit over our time, but perhaps you could take one more if someone wants to raise their hand.
Sounds good. Drago?
Sorry to keep asking. One of the issues with Zoom that I had and kind of projecting from my iPad to kind of show the notes and annotations was, especially here on campus, I guess some delay between I moved to the next slide on my tablet and it doesn't show up, and then it like 10 seconds it doesn't show up, so I had to go back and forth, keep clicking until it finally takes. Have you seen that, and have you seen that in Teams? Does it appear to be better in syncing?
So here is what I do. So because I do connect my iPad to the same meeting, so I actually don't connect my iPad to my laptop to the meeting, right? So I'm in the meeting twice. So right now I'm sharing from my iPad, right? So when I start for broadcasting, right, it says Zoom broadcasting, I share, and then I open my notepad. So here is my notepad, right? And then I pull out my pen and I can start writing, right? So you get your draw, you get your colors, you start annotating right here. So because they are independent, the two devices are independent, I do not get the lag.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
Which is crucial because everybody that I talk to connect their iPad to the laptop and then they present. So right now I am independent of the laptop. I'm just projecting from my iPad, right? And my iPad is flat on the desk. So it actually looks at the ceiling. So from the laptop, I don't share my face, right? My face is still from the laptop, not from the iPad. The iPad is just a piece of paper that I can write on, and I scroll up and down. It's really just, it replaces your digital camera, the document camera, right? So many faculty will use a document camera to write on, and then they just share that. Well, instead of doing that, I'm actually sharing from my iPad. But again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to connect two devices. So this is connected to the same Zoom meeting. If you actually look in the participants list, you're going to see I'm in the same meeting twice because one is my iPad and one is my laptop. And that has been a huge difference for me.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Ralucca, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. We will stop recording in a second, but we'll keep the meeting open for just another minute or so that those of you who would like to download Ralucca's slides, you can go right to the top of the chat window and you can download those. As soon as we can, we will have the recording up on the TLC website, which is where you can go for help and suggestions on how to use Teams and the other techniques and technology for teaching both online and in the classroom. There's a ton of information there, and the GIAC team is here to help you out if you have questions or would like some ideas. So thanks again. We will stop recording. We'll keep the meeting open just for a second, and hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you very much, Fred. So I'll stick around to answer questions. I'll put my email in the chat. So if you would like to text me particularly, I'm happy to answer. But as Fred just mentioned, you should reach out to TLC for help on how to do it or why isn't that showing up for me. But if you have particular questions for me on how I use it, reach out to me and I'm happy to talk.